The BBC has released a new documentary presented by journalist Louis Theroux called The Settlers. It focuses on the figures behind the movement to make the West Bank and Gaza Jewish and to purge the areas of Palestinians. One of those figures is Daniela Weiss, known as the godmother of Israel's settler movement. She's the founder of the Nashallah Settlement Movement. That's a group that has the explicit backing of several politicians in the Netanyahu government. Now, in one interview, Weiss revealed her political understanding of that movement.
Do you have influence over government?
No question. Who did all this?
Can you call Netanyahu?
What do you mean? Like this? No, I call his aides.
So the idea is to force the government by putting people, starts with small settlements, then they get bigger, then they get recognized by the State of Israel, and basically creating a new demographic reality.
We do not force a government. We do for governments what they cannot do for themselves. Even if you take Netanyahu now, he is very happy with what we do here and also about our plans to build Jewish communities in Gaza. He's happy about it, but he cannot say it. He says the opposite. It's not realistic. Good! We will make it realistic. It's not forcing the government, it's helping the government.
Really important points. So it's lots of the documentary sort of showing how extreme the settlers are, but that I think is the key moment because it's saying we are doing the Israeli government's job for them, right? Because we're changing facts on the ground. Because obviously, you know, in 1967, you can say, it would be a crazy proposition to say that the Israelis could build all of these settlements in the West Bank. No Israeli prime minister could come forward and just say that. But if they tolerate the settlements being built, then to say, the Israelis are already there, we can't ask them to leave, then that suddenly seems realistic, right? So the settlers, their job is to change facts on the ground so that then the Israeli government can just rubber stamp it. And of course, the map you saw there in the clip shows all the Israeli settlements built in the West Bank since the Six-Day War of 1967. During that period, Israel seized the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights, bringing 1 million Palestinians under the country's control. The occupation of those territories remains illegal in international law, a point Theroux put to Weiss.
Because it's territory that was won in the 67 war, that under the Geneva Convention, transferring a civilian population into a conquered terrain, that's considered a war crime.
What I do here is a war crime.
According to the UN.
You're cooperating with the person who committed a war crime?
Well, I'm interviewing you.
It's a light felony.
It's a light felony, right? So you can see how it's a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You know, we're not supposed to do it, but everyone does it. It's a bit like speeding. I've used this example before on the show. You know, we're not supposed to go at 35 miles an hour. You're not supposed to, on a motorway, go at 72 miles an hour, but sort of everyone does it. What are you going to do? She's like, you're not supposed to illegally settle other people's land and kick them off based on their ethnicity. You're not supposed to do ethnic cleansing, but, you know, in Israel, minor felony. Who doesn't do it? And Weiss, of course, isn't satisfied with just settling the occupied West Bank. Gaza was also settled by Israelis until 2005, when the Israeli government decided to disengage from the Strip. 21 settlements were torn down, and instead Gaza was placed under permanent siege. But Weiss has made no secret of her plans to help Israeli settlers return to Gaza. In November last year, Israeli soldiers helped Weiss to enter Gaza so she could scout out potential locations for future settlements. That's an idea she remains committed to. And at one point during the documentary, Theroux follows Weiss to a meeting with a group of rabbis and potential settlers at a viewing point near the Gaza border. There they survey the smoking territory and making plans to move Israelis in once, as they see it, the Strip is emptied of Palestinians. Afterwards, accompanied by a military convoy, Theroux's car follows Weiss's vehicle. Suddenly, she veers off the road and makes a dash for the Gaza border. Moments later, military vehicles intercept her, blocking her path to the enclave. Later in the documentary, Theroux asked Weiss what she was trying to do.
I wanted to show the rabbis that Gaza is not something beyond reach.
Would you say October 7th made people more receptive to your message and to your point of view?
No doubt. The October 7th naturally made people more receptive to the idea of the Great Israel. But the next step, Jewish settlements in Gaza, is a very difficult step that demands a lot of work. You have to influence the leftists, the government, the nations of the world, using the magic system, Zionism. You redeem the land, you establish communities, you bring Jewish families, you live Jewish life, and this will bring light instead of darkness.
Light instead of darkness, that's how she describes ethnic cleansing. Theroux's documentary seems to have been pretty well received so far, but back in February when the production was announced, The Spectator published this piece by Jonathan Sacerdotti, called "Why Does Louis Theroux Keep Picking on Israeli Settlers?" That's not a protected characteristic. Being an illegal settler is not a protected characteristic. The article attacks the BBC for commissioning a program that, without having even seen it, the author believes will be biased against Israel. That piece, though, begins with a comparison that perhaps doesn't portray Israeli settlers quite as positively as Sacerdotti would like. He writes this: when is Louis Theroux going to make a documentary where he embeds himself with Hamas in Gaza or Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Jenin, Nablus, Tarqum, or Kilkia? Probably never, because he'd most likely come to a sticky end. Instead, Theroux is once again making a film about Jews in Judea and Samaria, the region known as the West Bank, focusing on so-called settlers. So he doesn't even think, he just thinks this is already part of Israel and these are not settlers. This is a very, very extreme man, it seems. Meanwhile, The Guardian has given the documentary 5 stars, but their reviewer has potentially missed the point. So in an otherwise glowing review, Stuart Heritage ends by saying this: as with everything, you wish certain aspects of the situation could be explored more. Most notably, the peripheral glimpses of Israeli activists who protest against the settlements probably needs more airtime, if only to demonstrate that this is a problem of individuals rather than an entire nation. Ash, how, I suppose, blinkered in your kind of liberalism, I suppose, in this sense, do you have to be to sort of have watched that and say, well, it's just some bad apples, really, isn't it?
No. But Michael, I think you're getting this all wrong, because, we might do a piece about the royal family, and we might talk about all the people that support the royal family in this country. But in order to really balance it out, I think we need to hear a lot from the people who believe that King Charles is really secretly a lizard, because that's also a point of view that exists in this country. This is the thing about liberalism. Like, liberalism is a system of cope. At its heart, liberalism is a system of cope. It is a philosophical, psychological desire to comfort yourself with facts blown up or taken out of context, or narratives which comfort you, because if you are presented with this false equivalence, a false sense of, oh well, one side and then the other, then you don't really have to take a stance on anything. Right? That's what it's about. Yes, there are some people in Israel who protest against the occupation. Yes, there are some people, there's been a more popular movement against Netanyahu, which is, by the way, much bigger than the one that opposes the occupation. But these are not meaningful or impactful or significant political movements in Israel. Like, that's just the fact, and it's a sad fact. But it's a fact. Like it is a fact, and it would be like going back to the times of slavery, right, in the cotton picking South, and being like, oh well, we've heard a lot from white landowners who own slaves and really support slavery, but like, in order to balance out the study of history, we have to hear from the white landowners who don't like slavery in Alabama as well. Like, it's just like, the number is so small that it's not fucking relevant. Like it's not relevant to the story. And your desire for balance takes you further away from the truth than closer to the truth. And this is the interesting thing about the BBC. And it was animated by that wonderful exchange between Amal Rajan and Gary Lineker. Amal Rajan stands for impartiality. Gary Lineker stands for facts. Sometimes facts are not impartial. And I suppose there's one last thing that, maybe some people in our audience will disagree with me. I say, let Israelis speak for themselves. Let Israelis speak for themselves. I don't want to hear from the liberal Zionist hand-wringers who work in the British media. I don't want to hear from, David Menzer, who's, a spokesperson for Israel, who I believe used to be involved with Labour Friends of Israel. I don't want to hear from them. I want to hear from Israeli Zionists themselves, because then all of this fucking obfuscation and no, it's not really that bad. And, the likes of Danny Finkelstein saying things like, Israel would never drone a child, is that you've got Israelis who are politically impactful, close to those in power, and also speak to the point of view of the majority of Israelis, saying it as they see it and laying out what it is they want, which is not to share the land, which is not a real two-state solution, which is not a democratic one state, which is not about seeing Palestinians as equals. It is fundamentally about ethnic cleansing. Fundamentally about ethnic cleansing. So I say, let Israelis speak for themselves. In fact, we need to hear from more Israelis in British media, because then at least some of this, I'm sorry, I'm swearing too much because it makes me really angry. This sort of like, if it wasn't for Hamas, or if it wasn't for the Second Intifada, or if it wasn't for, Israel would be a lovely country, really. I wouldn't have these dingbats doing my head in anymore, because in a way they do my head in more. The dishonesty of it does my head in more.
I just brought up a tweet from Richard Sanders. So he made some of those Al Jazeera documentaries for it. We've interviewed him on the show before. So he shared a Daily Mail review, which gave it 2 stars because they said about the Louis Theroux, his interviewees are carefully chosen to reinforce the BBC narrative that Israelis are the oppressors and Palestinians their victims. Can you imagine thinking that is like a narrative that someone has invented? But then this is Richard Sanders speaking from his own voice. So this is the Al Jazeera, well, he's a freelance producer, but does a lot for Al Jazeera. Says, some years ago, I made a film on the West Bank. I tried very, very, very hard not to choose settlers who were instantly loathsome racists. My God, it was a struggle.